So, I suppose I have a bit of a question. Is this even really a farce? Recently, Armstrong Powerhouse, a well-respected train sim, I suppose you call them a modder. Armstrong Powerhouse and Goo Studios have released their Class 317 multiple unit pack for Train Simulator 2021. Now, the Class 317 is a train that has been sorely missing from Train Simulator since day one. There was a freeware 317 made on UK Train Sim, but if we're being honest, the quality was a bit rubbish. After all, it was freeware. So, I think it was some point last year, Goo Studios started making A-Class 317/1, which is more or less what you're seeing on the screen right now. Class 317s are a very popular multiple unit in the United Kingdom. They've been around since the early 80s, so they're almost 40 years old. They're just very well known, very popular, sort of north of London units. Well, London suburban units, really. I myself grew up with these around 2004. I remember the /2s, or /6s, I suppose, with the wagon prism livery, and that is to date one of, if not my favourite, train livery ever. Honestly, I do love these trains. They're hideous, but I love them. So when Armstrong Powerhouse announced that they were doing this 317 multiple units pack volume 1 with Goo Studios, you can understand that there was quite a lot of anticipation towards it. After all, this train has not had any really large-scale release in Train Simulator's history. I think the last official Train Simulator it was in was Microsoft Train Simulator. However, when Armstrong Powerhouse started releasing audio snippets, there's little sneak peeks at the train, that's when the few dissenting voices started speaking up. Now, I will point out that this is a minority. Most people are absolutely fine with the quality of this pack. I myself, I am fine with it. But a few people out there, well, you can't please everyone. And these people, who seem to live and breathe Class 317s, are rather disappointed that this pack doesn't sound 101% accurate. What does that mean? Well, for reasons as yet unknown, Armstrong Powerhouse has reused the motor sounds from a different multiple unit pack. Both the Class 317 and the Class 319, two fairly similar multiple units, use the exact same traction motors, GEC G315BZ traction motors. Both 317 and 319 use these GEC motors. And when you listen to the 317 pack and the 319 pack side by side, you can tell that the two are, at the very least, incredibly similar. There are differences, but for the most part, the traction motor sounds are the same, and I will admit that this is a valid complaint. Of course, this has led this vocal minority, to jump on this sort of bandwagon and start accusing Armstrong Powerhouse of various undesirable things, such as laziness, not respecting source material, not even liking the train, thinking that we won't notice, or something like that. Very negative things that kind of paint a picture of how these people think, actually. That they immediately jump to such negative conclusions when there is entirely likely a legitimate, much more mundane reason that the 317 pack is reusing 319 pack sounds. First off is the current world situation. You know, the pandemic. With the initial lockdown in the UK preventing all but essential travel, Armstrong Powerhouse was likely unable to go out and record many of the sounds that a 317 makes. At some point, though, they were able to record some of the sounds. We do know that much. They do credit Great Northern for assistance in recording sounds. They obviously have many of the cab sounds, and some of the other sounds that a 317 makes, but not the traction motors. Now, when you point out the whole COVID situation, these dissenting voices are quick to point out that they could have acquired audio recordings from the community. They could have gone into empty stock and distanced themselves to record the sounds that way. Or maybe they could have had a bit of foresight and recorded the sounds last year. But then that assumes Armstrong Powerhouse knew about Goo Studios' Class 317 project last year. We don't know when they came into correspondence. When did they get into contact? Was it, if it was sometime last year when the 317 pack was in its infancy, then yeah, I can understand why people are gonna be a bit upset, to say the least. But for we know, the correspondence might have started earlier this year, at which point they're not gonna have as much time to get all the sounds. Maybe all they could do was record the cab sounds and maybe the compressors and a few other bits, and that's it. And time constraints or something stop them from getting the motor sounds. Maybe Great Northern didn't want the motors to be recorded, or maybe they booked a unit that had a fault and didn't have the motors working or wasn't in a workable state. Maybe there was some sort of technical fault on Armstrong's side. Maybe the recordings he made of the motors were damaged or unusable in some way, and he was forced to reuse 319 sounds until such a point where he can get 317 sounds. And this is just talking about the train, the company, equipment. We don't know how Mr. Armstrong himself acts. We don't know his personal situation. We don't know what he's like. For we know he prefers to do things his own way. Make sounds the way he wants to make them, in the way that he knows how to do it, that he's figured out over this past decade, I suppose, recording train sounds. He could be quite stuck in his ways. Kind of like me. If I have a way to do something, like if I know a way to do something, and someone else comes along and says, "Oh no, this is a better way," like I'd prefer to do it my way, the way that I know. So all these people that have been sending in their own sounds to Armstrong Powerhouse saying, "Oh, use these sounds for the 317." Maybe to him it's kind of insulting that you're saying, "Oh, my work is better than yours." You may not mean that, but maybe he sees it that way. I know I would. That's how I am. I have Asperger's. Maybe he has Asperger's. Of course, it could be that he's got lazy, or he's got complacent, or that he doesn't like the 317s. I'm not counting those reasons out. It could be something as disappointing as Armstrong Powerhouse being lazy. But then he has, in the past, gone out of his way to record different Class 37s and different trains that use the same engines before. Like the Class 66 and Class 67 locomotives use the exact same motor, the exact same engine, prime mover, EMD 12N 710 G3B EC two-stroke diesel V12 engine. Seriously, Class 66 and Class 67 use that exact same engine right down to the last letter. So, if Armstrong Powerhouse truly didn't care, then he would have used 66 sounds on a 67, even though the two sound quite different. Differences in construction, maybe differences in idle speeds. For whatever reason, a 66 and a 67 don't sound the same, even though they use the same engines. He went out of his way to record two different Class 37s for the two Class 37 enhancement packs. Not enhancement packs, locomotive packs. He goes out of his way to create all these scenarios that come with these sound packs and enhancement packs. He goes out of his way to create them using real timetables. That doesn't sound like someone who doesn't care to me. If he truly didn't care, he'd just create the sound pack for Class 67 using Class 66 sounds and call it a day and say, why are people complaining? It's the same engine, right? So, why would he not record the 317 motor sounds? There has to be a valid reason. For example, when he went out and made a Class 303 enhancement pack, he had to reuse motor sounds from a Class 455, because the 303, well, it's been out of service since 2002. There's only one intact unit left in existence, and it's stuck on an unelectrified heritage line and has to be moved around with a diesel. That doesn't mean it doesn't make any sounds, but its motor has been inactive and probably quite decrepit for some time. So he had to go out and reuse sounds from that. So there has to be a legitimate, valid reason that the 317 pack is reusing 319 sounds. I'm not discounting that it's potentially laziness or that he doesn't care, but right now I'm inclined to believe that there is a valid reason, that something has prevented Armstrong Powerhouse from getting the right sounds, and that when the Volume 2 pack comes along, when Volume 2 comes along, if it's still reusing the sounds, then yeah, my faith will be shaken. A little bit. For me, I care mostly about the liveries. Yeah, the sounds are great. As long as it sounds 90% the same, I'm fine with it. I don't live and breathe Class 317s, right? Unlike some people like this West Anglian guy, who works on 317s every day and seems to know every single nook and cranny, every single rattle and creak and pop that these things make. So maybe he's judging it too harshly because it's not including this one rattle that Unit 512 makes or whatever. But yeah, right now, the Volume 1 317 pack, right now, I think is in a good place. Volume 2 is where we really need to pay attention. Because if it reuses sounds, if it reuses all the sounds, that's when we need to start questioning. Of course, we've got about a year to wait until Volume 2 comes along. Maybe less, maybe more. But right now, for me, it's too early to start bashing Armstrong Powerhouse because, oh, you reused sounds. Right now, there has to be a valid reason. I'm sure as soon as he's able, he'll record sounds from he'll record the real motor sounds from a Class 317 and be able to superimpose it not just onto the Volume 2 pack, but also update the Volume 1 pack. I know I keep reiterating this, but there has to be a valid reason that Armstrong Powerhouse has reused sounds. I believe he does care, that he goes out of his way to record as many sounds as he can, so there has to be a reason that he didn't record the motor sounds of a 317. Yet he hasn't recorded whatever squeak and rattles and pops that these 317s are making. And right now it's too early to jump on the bandwagon and start bashing Armstrong Powerhouse for this one very minor reason. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of the pack. It doesn't affect the enjoyment of the other 95% of people who have bought this pack. Most people are fine with it. I'm fine with it. It's just these few people who are nitpicking. Sure, Armstrong Powerhouse does say on their website that they want to make trains that sound, look, and feel like the real thing, but it doesn't say to expect 100% accurate. It feels like these people who are complaining want to jump through the screen and get on it. But yeah, I've been dragging this video on for far too long now. It's time to end. I will end off with this. If Volume 2 reuses sounds, yes, I will question it. But right now, I'm happy. Everyone else, for the most part, is happy. Just leave it alone.